Critical EDH, Taste the Rainbow. What's up, guys? We are in Logan's car.
No, we're in Dom's car.
Dom's car? Holy cow.
Yeah.
Well, we may not know what's driving the meta, but we definitely know who's driving us to Fishbowl. I mean, talking about the meta, what are you guys expecting to see at Fishbowl? Because I know it's going to be outside of Denver. Are you guys kind of like expecting some like random West Coast tech, or do you think it's going to be more of what we saw last week?
There's 300 and something people. It's going to be it's going to be everything.
Yeah, I would say like a good 30% of the decks are probably going to be Kinnan.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe 25.
20.
I don't want to rub
15.
elbows with that many Kinnan players.
I feel like in the first 2 rounds, there's a very good chance you're going to be playing against the Kinnan.
Oh, for sure.
Are you guys preparing for like some super random like stacks that you haven't seen, or is your plan just to like play through whatever arrives? You're not really worried about like kind of preparing for those.
I don't know. Stacks doesn't really stop for a 6 studies, so I'm not that concerned at the moment.
Yeah, the secret to not playing against stacks in tournament is to not scrub out.
Yeah, the worse you do, the more likely it becomes, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
so true.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's definitely my experience as well. But that's also, I think, a lot of, sometimes we joke about like, oh, if you do bad in the first round or two, then you're against like people who are easier to beat. And I think that's like not true. I think it's really hard to climb back from a losing streak, especially at a tournament as big as like Fishbowl, because the further down you go, the like wilder the jank is going to get, and the harder it's going to be to like politic or essentially navigate a lot of those like weird board states.
I've noticed when people play at higher stakes tournaments and they start doing worse, they mentally start doing worse because the stakes are high. And I think getting into pods with those players is it's hard. First of all, it's hard to be in that space as a player, and it's not somewhere you want to be. But
Yeah.
and like I totally understand. But I also, if I can win a couple games early, like then I feel like it might be a little bit more chill.
Yeah, just so much for your confidence. Like it, no matter how hard you try to fight it, it's rough to be in the mind state of I spent $400 to have a bad time. And I'm still here having a bad time.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like because like with bigger tournaments, the nature of the tournament is like more of a marathon, right?
Yeah.
So if it's hard to keep that mental up when you're tired.
We've got 8 rounds, right?
8 rounds. We got 6 rounds day 1.
I think it's 1 through 5 on day 1, and then 3 rounds on day 2.
Okay, that'll be more manageable. That's still a lot.
That's still so much to play.
That's essentially top 16ing at a smaller tournament.
So this is all of our like biggest tournament we've been to.
Mm-hmm.
No question about it.
Yeah.
I don't know what to expect. Like I just it sounds like it's almost more like a Magic Con, but kind of wrapped around or centered around a tournament.
My game plan is like, I know it sounds silly, but like sometimes like either that like fake it till you make it, or like act like you've been here before mentality. Like even if it just, because it can be really daunting, because like even at like Snowy Summit, like you're in this huge room with tons of people, and Fishbowl is like literally twice the size of that.
Yeah.
So there's going to be tons of noise, tons of people moving around, probably a few odors. So like my game plan is just to stay super focused on the fundamentals. I'm there to play my deck. I'm there to play Magic. And then even if I'm super nervous, not to let it show. Because I feel like people can kind of like smell fear, especially in round 1.
Yeah.
All right. So we got in a little bit about like how we're feeling about the tournament. Let's talk about like what we're actually doing to get to the tournament. Like how are we feeling, the night before flying out, or I guess we're flying out tonight, but like what is our plan? Like we have to pick up 4 people. There's 4 of us going together. Traveling with your friends is always fun, but we're also kind of like leaving our families and stuff at home and like taking time off of work and stuff like that. I mean, what is that kind of like for you guys?
Well, I mean, for one, we're getting in pretty late too.
What's our like time schedule and plan and stuff?
Yeah, so like we're getting the airport. I mean, our flight leaves at like almost 11. Yeah, it almost leaves at 11 or near 11, and then we're not getting to California until almost like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh man! And how big's the time change for going?
1 hour.
1 hour back.
1 hour back.
So like you'll be sleeping in like a little bit longer, right? So it's not like the worst.
Dude, well, it's rough for me though because I tend to have a really strong circadian rhythm. So even if I don't go to bed until like 3 or 4 a.m., I'm still gonna wake up at like 7. So my plan is to like just take a lot of melatonin, try to get like just. I usually don't sleep on airplanes very well, but I'm like bringing a book or I'll watch like Interstellar or something just to try and at least mentally just stay calm, because I think once you're in that kind of like Zen space, once you're kind of like at ease or comfortable, it's a lot easier to stay there than it is like get back in that headspace if your mood's kind of all over the place.
I think it's a lot easier to stay more comfortable when you have friends that are going with you and you're traveling with friends, because even if it's just me and my wife like traveling together, it's nice, but she's probably not going to play in a big tournament like this. So if I traveled with her, she'd just be staying in the hotel or hanging out with friends in San Diego or whatever. But it's kind of nice because we have 4 people. We're going to end up practicing tomorrow a lot, spend some time together, kind of formulate a game plan and get in the right mindset and have space and time to do that beforehand.
Yeah, it's like I'm really, really grateful that we kind of made the plan to get there ahead of time, because I feel like if we showed up like super late Friday night or super early Saturday morning, I don't know. I'm definitely someone where like it takes me a little bit to like settle in.
Yeah.
And so even if it's just the opportunity to sleep in the bed more than once before game day, I feel like that's really big. I feel very privileged to be able to be a part of like a team of people who were all able to get there kind of early.
I'm pretty excited to like work with you guys to get in the right like headspace for an event like this. I feel like even though we're competing individually, I feel like we're all kind of representing our area and our play group and stuff like that.
I think it definitely would be a good opportunity for, especially since we've been playing so many games in a row with each other the day before, to communicate either like dysfunctional play patterns. Like I know one thing you've talked about is all the times I'll tutor before I draw, even if I have another draw engine on board. And so, one time you were like, Eric, I've noticed that you do this. Like, do you have a good reason for it? You were super cool. You weren't like attacking or anything. And it took me like 30 seconds to not come up with a reason why I was doing it. And just little stuff like that. Like it's. I mean, most CDH players know this. It's the littlest changes that often make the biggest difference. Because
having a second set of eyes on your play style and someone actually being critical in a positive way, or just saying like, hey, this is something you can just do, that would be that minor improvement. I think we're all good enough players to win games. Like that's not even a question at this point, but it's taking it to that next level. We constantly talk about that on this channel. So
yeah, I don't know. What do you have anything kind of like what we're practicing tomorrow that you really want to keep an eye on, Dom? Either something that you really want to try to like focus in on to work at getting better before you hit Swiss, or just any like typical like a card you're trying to like get in practice playing around?
I think for me the big one is, since I don't play a lot of CDH anymore, I think the big one is mulligans. I struggle a lot with mulligans in tournament because there's a lot of factors to like mulligans, right? In CDH, seat position, that's really important. What you're playing against. Sometimes you don't find what you're looking for, and you have to learn how to adapt off of like a 3-4 hand mulligan.
Yeah.
And I'm playing a deck. I'm playing Blue Farm, so it's a deck that kind of, all the card quality is extremely high, right?
And mulligans really well.
Mulligans very well, but there's still a lot of nuance to it.
When it comes down to it, it's like find Esper Sentinel or find Mystic Remora, and like if that's the worst thing you're doing, then you're probably okay. But I totally agree with the mulligans thing, and that's the hardest thing to reframe your mind around, because if you're playing a lot of casual or you're playing other card games, CDH mulligans are so crucial, but they're very silent. You don't get like a lot of feedback on that from other players. There's no way to. So you kind of have to learn that or prepare for that on your own.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring up casual, because with casual, there's especially if you've noticed people that switch from casual to CDH, there's this mentality of good enough, right? And it's like, well, I have 2 lands, and that's good enough. Yeah. Right? That's okay. That'll get me. But in CDH, you can't really afford to just play land.
Dude, that is so
land.
True.
You have to advance your state on like sometimes even before turn 1, right? Like you have to be in a very good spot, especially depending on what decks you're playing against.
Dude, that's so true. I think that's one of the nice things about playing like more meta decks is you can more confidently trust that you can go down to 3 or 4 and legitimately your 3 cards are going to be better than the 7 cards that your opponent has across the table. Which is like nuts to think about, but
you're telling me that I can get 3 cards in Blue Farm and they're better than Rurik Thar's? No, I'm just kidding. I'm throwing shade unnecessarily to a Rurik Thar player that doesn't really exist.
But it was super interesting talking. Two things I learned when I was talking to Jacob, interviewing him before the top 4 game at EG, is one, we had a super similar experience of, in all our games that went really well, we mulliganed like really, really low. And so I think, Dom, the way you worded it, of like not settling for good enough, that's something I want to keep in mind. The other thing that I'm really trying to embrace is Jason talks a lot about...
I do not think we're going the correct way.
It's taking
It just went from 8 minutes to 11.
What the hell?
I think we may take it wrong.
Yeah, it's taking us in a circle.
Very cool.
That's okay. So Jason, a lot of times he'll talk about like, oh, I don't think I was supposed to win that game. Something I didn't realize until I was looking back on EG. The EG tournament is in 3 out of my 4 games, I was in 4th seed. And something I want to be better at Fishbowl, especially since there's so many rounds, is that like if I get like 2 or 3 games,
yeah. Call Emily.
I'll stop.
No, that's fine.
If I like end up in the same situation, instead of just trying to focus on like, oh, I can't believe I lost, thinking about things like, oh, like was I in 4th seat and had to go down to 3 cards? Maybe
hey, you're going the wrong way. We need to take the next exit and turn around.
I know. I have a map app that's telling me I'm going the wrong way.
Okay, I didn't know if you knew that. That's all right. Okay, I'll meet you there. I'm right behind you.
Okay. For 11 minutes.
That's fine. No worries. Bye-bye.
Jay will be okay.
Emily, thoughts on Banner 6 study?
Yeah, so we're our wives are carpooling together, and then the 3 of us and Jay are going to continue on to the airport. But we're meeting for some quick dinner and try to collect our thoughts and say goodbye and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Eric, that you brought up the fact that in the last tournament for EG's 1K that you were in 4 seat each time. And that is like one thing that I know, especially I have to watch that for my mental, because in tournament there's a lot of times where, I mean, it's confirmation bias, right? Like if I feel like I'm always getting 3rd or 4th seat, then I'm going to notice every time, and it's just going to kind of ruin my mental, you know?
I try not to let things like that affect me anymore. I pretty much won Snowy Summit from like 3rd seat or 4th. And yeah, it sucks. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not where you want to be, but I think the higher and higher quality of games you get, the less and less it matters.
Do you think with the meta slowing down and the prevalence of just sitting behind value engines, do you think it doesn't matter as much on seat position if you get an early value engine out, like a Esper, like early card draw, right?
I think it matters more on paper, but it feels like it matters less. Like if you're able to get a draw engine out on 4th seed on turn 1 or 2, I think you're overall feeling pretty good, unless that thing is Sylvan Library, then you're really not online till turn 3. But outside of that, you can kind of sit and chill, and you can also maybe hold an interaction piece and like hold it over people's heads and try to make the game last that much longer, but you're still like on the back foot. There's no question about it.
Yeah, so I guess in those situations, how do you guys manage, like in a, because I mean statistically, right?
Yes.
Setting in 4th seat is the numbers are bad. They look real bad.
Oh yeah, they're horrendous.
But I mean, CDH kind of has this axis that a lot of other competitive games don't have, which is like the political angle.
Yeah.
So I guess how do you guys leverage that that position that you're in? You know, if you're in 4th seat.
I think the first thing to remember is you're playing the same deck regardless of what seat you're sitting in, and you're playing the deck that is primed to win. So you're starting at a disadvantage, and there's really no way around that in the format that we're in. But you still have the same card quality as you would any other seat.
I think I try to think about it in 2 ways. One, especially if I'm on blue farm and I go down to 3 or 4 cards, that basically guarantees that the first spell I cast doesn't get countered, even if it's like a Rhystic Study or a Smothering Tide, because we're in a format where, especially when you're in a tournament setting, you just can't afford to just completely blow a player out of the game, because like weirdly everyone kind of needs each other to be in the game right until the very end. So as long as you play your cards right, I think it gives you a little bit more room to like maneuver.
I think good players can recognize that, but players that are either new or maybe not as experienced, it's hard for them to be like, well, I have this mental misstep. I'm going to misstep fourth seats Mystic Remora. And it's like, I'd like to play the game Magic the Gathering. Like, I didn't come here to get blown out and lose. And a lot of people have this, I don't know, for lack of a better word, delusion that taking someone out of the game is something that's worthwhile, when I don't really think it is.
I don't think it's as intuitive. It's not intuitive, right? Like, you're playing in a format where you're playing to win, and initially, if you ask anybody, right, like, how do you win? You knock out the other players, right? But that's not exactly how CDH plays, right? You're trying. I mean, yeah, on some level, you're trying to outlast and outvalue your opponent, especially in this meta. But yeah, the fact that you kind of, Eric, you brought up that really good point where you kind of need to use your other opponents to not only like stop someone from winning, but also just kind of like, it's weird having to like work together as a table.
I think the comparison you made earlier to casual is also really helpful, because I think in casual there's more typically someone who's leading the pack, especially if everyone's keeping good enough hands. One person's going to have a hand that's more good enough than everyone else. But in CDH,
Art is very strange. I've never gone this way.
I've never been in the middle seat without a seatbelt before.
No. You're wearing a seatbelt, Eric, right?
Yeah, the seat's wearing a seatbelt, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But because exactly, you're right, Tom. If you talk to your opponent and you're like, you're about to turn this 3v1 into a 2v1, they're going to be like, hell yeah, that rules. But I think everyone thinks they're the one, and typically in a CDH tournament, or even just in CDH games in general, in this meta, windows don't open up for people to win, typically until like round 4 or 5, or at the very least, the last 10 minutes of the round. And so if you're trying to take someone out of the game super early, I don't know, man. It's just too big of a risk. Because especially, for instance, like, let's say you're playing Blue Farm Dom, and you go down 3 cards, and it's literally just casting like a Wheel of Fortune or a Rhystic Study. Not only does that mean that you have a way to get back into the game, but that also means that you're going to have to spend at least a turn or two kind of clawing back in. And so that means if I have a Rhystic Study, you can't afford to like not play into it, right? Which I think is another component as well. But so yeah, I think if I'm at a table and I'm in 4th seed and I have to go down 3 or 4 cards, one is like, oh, I'm just a little guy. That's strategy number 1. 2, which is weirdly different, is pointing out that someone else is the enemy. I used to think that they were kind of the same, but it's very different social strategies to be like, you don't need to be worried about me, and like, you do need to be worried about him, because those don't always go together.
Because you can use the pieces that you have to convince someone to, maybe counter a spell that needs to be countered, or remove something that's like really, that's a problem. And that's something that I noticed that players like Jason and Logan, you guys do a lot, where you kind of just sit there and you let other people kind of play their game, and then you almost use the other players to not like a, I don't know, maybe it is a little manipulative for playing, you're playing to win, right? But like, you're trying to use their resources to, to kind of, to slow down the other players.
I think what I'm looking to do, in my terms, the way I think about it is I'm trying to stabilize the game by turns 2 or 3, where no one is actively winning or pushing for a win, and then I can start to find my pieces. I can find what I need to either assemble a win or go over top of someone with like flash speed or things like that. And for better or worse, I think that's kind of the main like strategy right now for a lot of decks, or at least what I think are the good ones. Because if you can stabilize the game, then you can go, well, I just have all of the resources I need. I can stop whatever's coming in this way. I can work with the table to say, well, no one's winning right now. And then whenever someone's pressured to go for it, or they think that they have a window, they probably don't realize that there's really no window there.
Yeah, I when I first started going to tournaments, and I was definitely like really new to the scene, and I had the experience of like a lot of people being like trigger happy in terms of using removal. Like people just be thrown around like Force of Wills or Swords of Plowshares when it wasn't really relevant, I think because they were scared of like threats on the board.
Yeah.
Now I'm experiencing a movement not towards people removing things too early, but going for wins too early.
Yeah.
And obviously everyone wants to win. I want to win. Ideally, I go like 8-0 on Saturday. That would be pretty rad.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But the reality of the situation is that like I think with how many draw engines are out, windows for winning have gotten so much smaller. And so yeah, I think the tool of communicating that like you have counter magic, in that like you don't want to use it and they don't want you to use it, so like just wait. You know, like you have a Valley Flood Caller, you don't need to do this right now. Like wait for this Chucklehead to make a one attempt, and then I'll use my counter spell on that. Like,
yeah.
I think you kind of just like navigate. You're just
So you're turning right up here. I also think on some level too, it's also kind of convincing the table, if there's a bunch of value engines, not like Ristic Studies or draw engines, like convincing them not to push, because then you're just giving someone else.
Yeah, that's what I mean by stabilizing. If everyone has a draw engine, no one can push.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well the game is in a state where
you're gonna go straight at the lane.
Not a lot is happening. And that sounds like so wrong and so antithetical to like a competitive game, but it's the best way to win at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's all I'm trying to do is win.
The thing I really want to, talking about that, something that you made me think about, something I want to do in games moving forward is once it hits turn 4 or 5, start prioritizing getting some form of flash. Because I find that a lot of times the reason I lose is because I recognize that I'm not going to get another turn. And so I kind of like have to push now.
Yeah.
Or else, right?
You lose your window because you don't have flash. Like your window is your turn until you have flash, and then it's like, oh, well, now I have whatever.
So if we're looking at like 30 minutes left on the clock, instead of like going for a Thassa's or something, I think I would like to get better about looking for a Born Upon to win or like a Valley Flood Caller, because that both gives me the option of pushing for a win on someone else's turn. But if I need to jump in, and even if I don't have an actual win, threaten a win to force a draw, I think that's another important tool to kind of keep around.
Speaking of
so much to focus on.
Speaking of clocks, we have about 2 minutes left on this video.
Heck yeah.
So I think the rest of our plan is pick up our boy Jay, go to the airport, go through security, probably chill at the airport as much as we can. I don't know what I'm going to do on the flight. I'll probably just listen to music or something. It's not long enough to nap. I don't think I'm going to be too wired.
I'm gonna pass out. I kind of need to with work.
You had a long day at work today,
Dude, yeah. It was crazy, but yeah, it was. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited for this.
You're gonna be around more, right?
Yeah, for sure. Either
we're leaving him at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah. Actually, he didn't make it to Fishbowl. He just stayed at Chick-fil-A.
Oh, dang. Oops. His Raul coin flipped in at work, so he didn't get through security.
Yeah, dang it.
Oh, here's our boy.
He's literally calling everyone.
Right,
sorry, Jay. We're almost there.
We're at the light.
All right, I'm gonna stop. Do you guys wanna?
All right, we'll see you in a minute. Okay, bye.
Cool. Stop.
Bye to you guys too.